Salut! Today we're going to learn a little more about verbs and the use of the infinitive, especially with prepositions. Then we'll learn some indefinite pronouns and finally we'll learn how to conjugate two new types of verbs. I hope you're still focused and motivated, because even when the year is over, there will always be more to learn and practice. And this playlist will always be available. Also, as always, I put more that I can cover in the video in the notes, so don't hesitate to download them using the link below to follow along and learn more. Alright, we have already seen some verbs that can use an infinitive directly after you conjugate them. For example, the verbs aimer and vouloir, which mean respectively to love and to want. They can be followed by any infinitive without any preposition. This is why I love to eat is j'aime manger, and I want to eat is je veux manger. But as I said, we can add the infinitive of any verb. So we could also say she loves to dance, which would be elle aime danser, or they want to drink, which would be ils veulent boire. We've also seen that some verbs use the preposition a after them, and then they can be followed by an infinitive. Sometimes it can change the meaning of a verb. For example, the verb arriver means literally to arrive, but if you use the verb arriver with the preposition a and an infinitive, it means to be able to do something or to succeed in doing something. So if I say, for example, j'arrive à faire mes devoirs, it would mean I am able to do my homework. However, we do have the expression être capable to mean to be able. So you got to keep in mind that if you use arriver à with an infinitive, it has a bit of a connotation that it was expected that you wouldn't be able to do it, but now you can. Either because you worked on it or because you found a way to do it. Also, please remember that the verb arriver with the preposition à can still be used with a location, to mean to arrive at a location. We're only talking here about when it's followed by an infinitive. Now, another verb that can use the preposition à and be followed by an infinitive is the verb hésiter, which means to hesitate. So, for example, you can say, I hesitate to speak French, by saying in French, j'hésite à parler français. Alright, now we're going to dive a little deeper into two verbs that use the preposition de followed by an infinitive. I'm talking about the verb demander de, which means to ask to, and dire de, which means to tell to. We have already seen the verb demander and dire, so this shouldn't be very complicated. But what you need to remember is that the person you ask or tell to do something is an indirect object. By that, I mean that you ask to someone to do something and you tell to someone to do something in French. For example, I ask John to eat in French is I ask to John to eat. And it would be je demande à Jean de manger. It's the same for dire. I tell John to eat is in French, I tell to John to eat. So we say, je dis à Jean de manger. Now, what do you think happens when we use pronouns? Well, we'll use indirect object pronouns, and the object pronouns come before the conjugated part of the verb. So, I'm asking him to eat would be je lui demande de manger. And I told her to eat would be je lui ai dit de manger. Now, when we have a negation with an infinitive, you need to remember one thing. If the negation applies to the infinitive, you will need to stick both parts of the negation together before the infinitive. It's actually the same in English. You can change what is negated in a sentence by moving the negation around. So the sentence, he doesn't tell me to eat is not the same as he tells me not to eat. In the first case, because the negation applies to a conjugated verb, we will keep it around as usual and say il ne me dit pas de manger. But in the second case, It tells me not to eat. Because the negation applies to the infinitive part, we will stick ne and pas together in front of the infinitive. And we will say il me dit de ne pas manger. There's actually a very good example you can see all around France, because signs and instructions often use the infinitive. That's what we call a strict command. It's meant to be impersonal and it applies to everyone. Basically, we use the infinitive to say do this or do not do this. In the negative way, instead of saying ne marchez pas sur la pelouse using the conjugated vous form, which would literally mean do not walk on the grass, we write ne pas marcher sur la pelouse using the infinitive or marcher ending in er. This would roughly translate to not to walk on the grass. But the point here is that because we use an infinitive in French, both the ne and pas come together before the infinitive. Alright, let's jump to some indefinite pronouns. In this case, this is more of a vocabulary list than a grammar lesson. These are pronouns, so they replace someone or something. And they're indefinite because we're not naming them as a specific thing. For example, when I say I'd like another beer after drinking a beer, we know I'm talking about a beer, but another could be any from the lot of other beers in the fridge. This is why it's indefinite. I'm going to give you 4 examples here, but I invite you to learn the vocabulary in the notes. Someone or somebody is quelqu'un. For example, you could say je cherche quelqu'un, which would mean I'm looking for someone. Something is quelque chose. For example, you could say je cherche quelque chose, which would mean I'm looking for something. I was talking about another earlier. Well, this one, even if it's indefinite, you need to agree in gender with the category of things you're talking about. For example, if I wanted to say I'd like another, but I'm talking about a beer, because beer is feminine, we would say je voudrais une autre bière. But if we talked about a book, because book is masculine, we would say je voudrais un autre livre. Finally, I'll give you 3 in 1. You can learn the following sentence. Anyone can become anything, anywhere. And it would be in French. N'importe qui peut devenir n'importe quoi, n'importe où. Alright, we are almost done. Let's see how to conjugate verbs of the last group ending in EINDRE and AINDRE. These are a bit hard to pronounce, so I'm going to conjugate one for each so you can try to practice and repeat after me. For verbs ending in EINDRE, we will use the verb éteindre, which means to turn off, as in to turn off the lights or the computer. The verb éteindre in the present is conjugated as follows. Please repeat after me. J'éteins, tu éteins, il éteint, nous éteignons, vous éteignez, ils éteignent. In the passé composé, the verb éteindre uses the auxiliary avoir. Therefore, it is conjugated as follows. Please repeat after me. J'ai éteint, tu as éteint, il a éteint, nous avons éteint, vous avez éteint, ils ont éteint. And finally, using the present for nous éteignons, we can remove the ending ONS and conjugate the verb éteindre in the imparfait as follows. Please repeat after me. J'éteignais, tu éteignais, il éteignait, nous éteignions, vous éteigniez, ils éteignaient. Now, the verbs ending in AINDRE are exactly the same, except you replace the E with an A. Let me conjugate for you the verb craindre, which means to fear. The verb craindre in the present is conjugated as follows. Please repeat after me. Je crains. Tu crains. Il craint. Nous craignons. Vous craignez. Ils craignent. In the passé composé, the verb craindre uses the auxiliary avoir. Therefore, it is conjugated as follows. Please repeat after me. J'ai craint. Tu as craint. Il a craint. Nous avons craint. Vous avez craint. Ils ont craint. And finally, using the present for nous craignons, we can remove the ending ONS and conjugate the verb craindre in the imparfait as follows. Please repeat after me. Je craignais. Tu craignais. Il craignait. Nous craignons. Vous craignez. Il craignait. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. We're almost at the end of the year now, so I hope you won't hesitate to go back to the previous lessons to practice points you may have forgotten by now, I don't know. I think during the summer I'll finish the book and go all the way to lesson 39, so we have it for the future. But once this is done, I think I'll continue and focus more on topical videos about French culture. So don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. In the meantime, I hope you learned something and I'll see you on the next one. J'espère que vous avez appris quelque chose et je vous verrai la prochaine fois. Au revoir. Je crains que cette vidéo soit allée trop vite.